This is chapter 25, entitled The One Who Knows. And the Pali for this section is Atako Bhagava Udanang Udanesi Anyasi Vatabo Kondanyo Anyasi Vatabo Kondanyoti Itihidang Ayasmato Kondanyatsa Anya Kondanyo Taveva Namang Ahositi. And the picture that we have is very broad and spacious, sort of luminous, open picture, and we have the words beginning at the top and at the bottom, and then just the centerpiece there is Anyasi Vatabo Kondanyo. So Anyasi means he knows, and then around the top here we've got many little images of Buddhas fading into the border work, and then again we have this Celtic knotwork, these sort of vines climbing up and then forming the same kind of beautiful framework from the earlier pictures of the Bhuma Devas, the earth, celebrating the events of the teaching. And then down here we have the Buddha and a few of the 5 disciples, and then lay people gathered around, also beginning to listen to the teachings in sort of 2s and 3s close by as the Buddha speaks, and then lotus blossoms around the platform that the Buddha is sitting on. And the translation of this in English is: Then the Blessed One uttered the great exclamation, "Truly, it is the good Kondanya who has understood. It is the good Kondanya who has understood." Thus it was that the name of Venerable Kondanya became Anya Kondanya, Kondanya who understands. So that's a little kind of Pali joke. It's resonated down through the 25 centuries that he became called Anya Kondanya, because that was and every so often the Buddha makes these exclamations, or when he's particularly enthusiastic or impressed, or is making a very positive point, then this is called an udana. And there's a whole book of the canon called the Udana, and it collects together these like stories, and then the particular occasions when the Buddha made these emphatic or dramatic statements. And this is the very first one, coming right at the beginning of his teaching career, and forms around this realization that Kondanya is understood. So while we've covered quite a bit of territory in the last few readings, but the whole piece about the devas and the different deva realms, and then the news sort of resonating up from the Bhuma devas, the earth spirits, all the way up to the Brahma gods, that's in a sense all sort of happening in the background. And then it's, if you remember, there was and before we got into the deva realms, and back in the the chapter called What Kondanya Knew, it's chapter 16, then this is where Kondanya has the insight. Now, while this discourse was being delivered, the untarnished and clear insight into Dhamma arose in Venerable Kondanya thus: whatever has the nature to arise has the nature to cease. So, in a sense, the whole subsequent 9 chapters, chapter 17 to 20 through to the end of 24, all that's been happening in the background. So as Kondanya understands, and then whoof, the news travels up through the heavenly realms, and this massive say reverberation of delight through to the far reaches of the cosmos, and the immeasurable light shining through the what they call the great Trichiliacosm, the 10,000-fold universal system. But all of that's happening at the exact same moment, so it doesn't take any time. And then, just as Kondanya understands, then we go back to that moment where the Buddha is realizing, oh, Kondanya is understood, and that it's not like you have the whole Deva experience, and then at the end of that, the Buddha makes this exclamation, but rather at the same time the Buddha sees it happening, and then immediately he realizes that Kondanya has realized the truth of the Dhamma and has entered the stream, then he says, Anyasi vatabo Kondanyo, Anyasi vatabo Kondanyoti. And Bo is a kind of, it means like a friend or brother or lad. It's a familiar expression. It's a sort of familiar form of expression. So when this fellow, one of the original lay supporters for Abhayagiri Monastery, when he was, I think he was signing a card for Ajahn Pasano's birthday, something like that, and he signed himself "Hey Boy," like because that's how he sort of he always felt like he was being asked to do different jobs around the place, and was happy to be, hey, come over here, Rick, can you help out with this? And so I said, well, actually in Pali, "Hey Boy," you would say as "Ehi Bo," like "Come here, boy," "Come here, friend." And so that it strangely enough comes across almost the same in "Ehi" means come, like come and like "Ehi Pasiko," come and see. So "Ehi Bo" means come here, boy, or hey, boy. And so that tickled Rick no end, and so he thought, oh, I've got a Pali name at last. So anyway, to continue with Ajahn Sucitto's commentary. These are the concluding words of the sutta. They remind us once again, after this long account, of the response to the turning of the Dhamma wheel, the central significance of the teaching. The Buddha himself makes no comment on the delight of the devas or the effect of the teaching. He simply relishes the significance of that insight. Whatever has the nature to arise, all that has the nature to cease. When one person attains right view, it means more in terms of transmission of the Dhamma than any other response, regardless of how jubilant, where insight is lacking. Jubilation, after all, arises and passes away, and the world in general remains none the wiser for it, as anyone who has witnessed the finals of a sporting event can testify. So the jubilation, yes, the team won, and then the next day you're just getting over the hangover. But so this is what really impresses the Buddha, is the fact that Kondanya has understood. So if you recall, after the Buddha's enlightenment, his first inclination was that there's no point to teach. There's no point in trying to teach because no one's ever going to understand this. The world is completely addicted to the self-obsession and is attached to, as he said, the world is addicted to becoming, to existence. It relishes existence. It knows only becoming or existence. And if I try and teach what I understand, then this will just be wearisome and troublesome for me. And so then that's when the Brahma Sahampati appears in the world and kneels in front of the Buddha and makes that statement about there are some beings with just a little dust in their eyes. And so then the Buddha, responding to that, then makes the effort to travel all the way to Varanasi and to meet his 5 companions. And then, lo and behold, Brahma Sahampati was absolutely right, that here is one of his old friends, Kondanya, who has understood. And that sense of excitement or joy is like, yeah, it's true. And that sense of the rarity or the delight that is being evoked in the Buddha is because he's seen that this is marvelous that another being has managed to understand. And a few readings ago, I was mentioning this simile that the Buddha gave about it's called the fingernails, and the first sutra in the section of the Samyutta Nikaya called the Breakthrough. And he reaches down and scratches the ground with his finger and says, "What is greater, the amount of dirt under my fingernail or the great earth itself?" And of course the monks who are there say, "Well, Venerable Sir, the amount of dirt under your fingernail is very small and the great earth itself is very, very large." And then he makes this emphatic statement of, so in the same way, the suffering that one who has made the breakthrough to stream entry, the suffering that they can expect to experience through the remainder of their lives is equivalent to the dirt under my fingernail, whereas the suffering that a being that has not made the breakthrough to stream entry can expect to experience is comparable to the great earth. so that it's a very sort of dramatic comparison. And then he goes on to make similar comparisons of what is greater, three grains of sand from the Ganges River or the Himalayan mountains. Well, the Himalayas are very, very great, and the sand from the Ganges is very, very small. And there's a whole series of suttas where it's basically exactly the same teaching, that the one who's made the breakthrough, one who has realized stream entry, the dukkha that they can expect to experience in the maximum of 7 more lifetimes is insignificant, it's minimal, it's totally negligible compared to the suffering that a being can expect to be experiencing through lifetime after lifetime after lifetime through the endless wandering of samsara. This great utterance of the Buddha about Kondanya's understanding is not meant to celebrate his teaching of the abstract doctrinal aspects of Dhamma, but that of the Dhamma becoming a living experience through right understanding. Kondanya heard the Buddha's words, and his insight was a realization of the causal nature of existence. This is a true transmission, a personal realization expressed in his own terms, rather than a mimicking of the teacher. So, as we were saying before, what Kondanya realizes, all that is subject to arising, is subject to cessation, is not something that the Buddha has said. He's not just repeating in his thoughts words that he's heard the Buddha say, but rather it's formed in an expression that's sort of formed itself through his own insight. So no wonder the Buddha expresses his approval, and he does so with that difficult to translate word bho, B-H-O, a term of address implying both friendship and respect. The first disciple has arisen. A way to the truth which the Buddha felt will be difficult for people to understand has been communicated. There is hope for this world. It also reminds me of a comment Lumpur Sumedho has made a few times, where he said the only time he ever saw Ajahn Chah get excited or lose his composure was the first time that Ajahn Sumedho, recited the monks' training rules at Wat Pah Pong, because up until then, the whole nature of the sort of a community of foreign monastics was almost unheard of. There were a few Westerners that were with Ajahn Mahabur up in Udon province. There was 1 or 2 Westerners. There was Ajahn Don, who was Tan Don was a disciple of Ajahn Fan. There was 1 or 2 Westerners down with Ajahn Buddhadasa in the south. Prakkanti Palos in Bangkok, but it was very, very, very few and far between, and none of the other foreign monks had ever learned to recite the monks' training rules, which is the Patimokkha is about 13,000 words Pali that you have to recite, and you can't make any mistakes. You have a monk who follows along, and if you make any mistakes, then that you'll be corrected as you go along. So the whole 13,000 words has to be pronounced correctly. You can make a lot of mistakes, but you'll get corrected a lot of times. And you just keep doing it until you keep going until you get to the end. So it's a major undertaking. And so when Lumpur Sumedho, as a young monk, had made the resolution to learn this, and then when he recited it the first time, he said, Ajahn Chah was sort of visibly charged up and excited. And I feel it's exactly the same. I wasn't there, obviously. I was running around somewhere in Kent, growing up. But that seems to carry this exactly the same kind of spirit as the Buddha is expressing here. That he's so delighted that his teaching has been able to affect this other person, that they've heard his words and they have been able to make the breakthrough to stream entry. How wonderful, how marvelous! And in the same way, Lumpur Chah was saying, "Well, this is great. There's hope for the foreign monks," and they showed not just a commitment to meditation and wanting to be in the forest for their formal bhavana, the meditation practice, but learning the whole monastic rule represents a very strong commitment and respect for the training precepts for the Vinaya, because it takes a heck of a long time to learn that whole text. It's a huge amount of application, and if your mind goes into there's no point in this is all just the Pali that I don't understand, this is just like 13,000 words of nonsense syllables, what's the point, and it's just the Vinaya anyway, who really cares? If your mind goes in that direction, there's absolutely no way you're ever going to learn to recite it. You really have to have a sense of this is worthwhile, this is important, this is the basis of our training, keep going. And so that Luang Por Chah saw that there was that say commitment to Vinaya, and that this young monk Sucitto had seen the worth of that and committed himself to learning it, and so there was had that same kind of catalyzing effect of creating this enthusiasm and sort of inspiration in his teacher. So Luang Por Sucitto was quite surprised that Ajahn Chah seemed to be so pleased and so delighted. But he said that was the only time he ever saw Luang Por Chah lose his composure. Otherwise, he was much cooler, and so but also he was pleased when people did take the trouble to learn the training rules. But also he wouldn't express his enthusiasm or sort of relate to the that undertaking in the same way. Ajahn Viradhammo frequently tells a story of how, because it took him a long time to learn the Patimokkha, and also he was a novice for a long time because he had debts he had to pay off. And so when he was very nervous when he did the first recitation at Wat Pah Pong, and so Ajahn Chah praised him and said, "Oh, well done, Tanvi. This is great. Fantastic. You've done a good job. You've chanted very well. Well done, lad." And so patted him on the head and said, "Well done." And so Ajahn V was going around on a little cloud for the next couple of weeks, and so he was very keen to recite it again the next time. And of course, he got the treatment the next time after Luang Por Chah could see that. I don't know whether it was actually, you would call it as taking the bait, but he saw that Ajahn V was like, "Okay, I can do it again," and was quite pleased with himself. And so he starts picking at Ajahn V's robe and starts sniffing it and chatting with the other monks. "God, these pharangs, they really stink. They don't know how to bathe. They don't look after themselves. They're pretty revolting, really, aren't they?" They're carrying this whole conversation on loudly while Ajahn V's trying to recite the Patimokkha in the midst of the group. So he got so if you assume that you are a favorite or that you are being smiled upon, then you generally get it in the neck like that. But on that first occasion, very genuinely, Luang Por Chah was in the same way. It was enthusiastic and delighted with the young Bhikkhu Sucitto's say gesture of commitment and the the fact that he was the very first, probably the first English-speaking monk ever to recite Patimokkha. In this painting, I use the word anyasi, he has understood, as the central feature, with the serene and all-embracing sky as the background. Understanding is the subject, rather than Kandanya. More central to the theme than Kandanya as an identity is the non-personal quality of awareness. This quality of knowing, of insightful awareness, does not arise and pass away, even though the mind consciousness that connects or looks into that state of knowing can be very impermanent. For most people, such moments of profound insight are very brief and rare at first, but they are never really forgotten, and there is the possibility of remembering. It becomes possible to let go, open up to timeless truth, and allow the mind consciousness to relax and move towards a more serene, timeless reflection. That which knows causality and the limitation of all causal conditions is not itself caused. So, sometimes it's called the uncaused, or the unconditioned, or the unborn, because it does not arise, it does not pass away. So we also call it the deathless, which, as everyone's very aware, is the major theme of this monastery, and the name Amaravati means the deathless realm. And so people like to philosophize and nitpick about, well, what's consciousness and what's awareness, and how is the awareness related to the unconditioned, and so it's easy to get wrapped up in a tangle of words and concepts. And if any of you have listened to many of Luang Por Sumedho's Dhamma talks over the last 25 years or so, as he would always encourage, and I've always found this extremely helpful, as soon as the mind starts to get into these theoretical tangles and sort of philosophical knots, he would just say, be awake. Be aware that your mind is trying to untangle something. That's what awareness is. You don't have to figure out a map or a picture of how it is. So you try to imagine the unconditioned or create a mental picture for that, and your mind just goes blank. But you can be awake. You can be aware. You can know that feeling of wanting to understand, or you can know the feeling of understanding. But that knowing of either understanding or not understanding, it's the same knowing. Like you can know that your eyes are closed, or you can know that the eyes are open. It's still the same knowing. In one mode, the eyes are closed. In another mode, the eyes are open. But the knowing is exactly the same, whether the eyes are open or closed. So the theme of Luang Por Sumedho's teaching was so much, don't theorize, be awake. And whereas our tendency as a culture and through our education and conditioning is getting the theory right, and then trying to abide in the theory or hang on to the theory. Oh, now I've got the map. Now I know how it works, and forget that, well, the map is only useful insofar as it helps you to make a journey. If you don't make the journey, the map is useless. And so that quality of being awake or being aware to this moment is, I think, it's important to bear in mind. So as your mind starts to get into doubts or questions about, or how it all fits together or what the terms mean exactly, then at that moment just to know, oh, this is the feeling of doubt. The mind is aware of the doubting, calculating, figuring out habit. That's what is there's awareness of now. Some people like to personalize that which knows and call it the one who knows, or Buddha nature, or they give it a function such as the knowing. Of course, these are all terms, ideas that act as pointers, but they too just arise and pass away. The cultivator of Dhamma contemplates this knowing and sees that it does not belong to anyone. It has no personal characteristics. It's not bound or located in time or space. Hence arises the insight known as anatta, not self, or non-self, the complete freedom of the mind from any need to hold, identify, or attain. Truth is no one's servant or possession, nor is it limited. It's like the sky of this painting. The sky above India in 500 BC may have been bluer and cleaner than that above the 20th century industrialized world, but its all-embracing quality has not changed. So truth is void of all characteristics apart from boundlessness and the ability to contain all manner of phenomena. Here it's painted blue, the colour of peace and infinity, the coolest receding colour. The focus of the painting is that sky, that all-embracing peace and infinity. It is accessible to all. That's the real encouragement. From our own insight, perhaps expressed in different words, we can all recognize truth. And in the early days of Amaravati, this pale blue colour was also in a way the insignia of Amaravati. That was the colour that Luang Por Sumedho favoured. Also, the fact that Amaravati is on a hilltop, and we had this great dome of sky above. Whereas Chithurst is very much the forest, and down in the valley under the downs, and very cosy and sort of delightful in that way. But one of the things that Luang Por was really attracted to at Amaravati was that quality of openness and the infinite sky, and that pale blue color was very much a theme through the sort of monastery decor in the early days. Also, the word knowing, probably the term vijja, and when we recite in that the Udapadi section, when they're going through the different qualities of the Four Noble Truths, then there's a repeated refrain that is recited over and over, so 12 times over, so 3 times for each of the sections: Chakung Udapadi, Jnanang Udapadi, Panya Udapadi, Vijja Udapadi, Aloko Udapadi. And so that those terms, Chaku is the word for eye, so it means vision arose. Udapadi means arose or came into being. Chakung Udapadi. Jnana is the Pali word jnana is related to our English word knowledge, the jna, like gnosis with a gn at the beginning. Knowledge, kn, and Pali jnana with an n tilde at the beginning. So knowledge arose. Panya, wisdom, arose. Vijja, vijja is the opposite of avijja, ignorance. So vijja is knowing or awareness. Aloka is light. So vision arose, knowledge arose, wisdom arose, awareness arose, light arose. So they're a whole constellation of related terms. Again, you get the pedants who say, well, vijja isn't exactly the same as jnana, and or that when it says panya is not really the same as jnana either. But the Buddha would often use these strings of terms, sometimes 6 or 7, 8, sometimes 10 or more related terms that all sort of point to a particular area, and so that's a verbal style that he employed, and so that you don't just have like a single term referring to a psychological or spiritual quality, but a whole spectrum of them, or a whole range. And Venerable Ananda Maitreya made an interesting comment about that many years ago, that he said it was his opinion that the reason why the Buddha used these sort of strings of terms, of adjectives or of nouns, that he said that his opinion was it was because the Buddha was probably talking to people from a range of different countries. There's some people from Avanti, some people from Vangsa, some people from Magadha, some people from up in the mountains, in the some people down from the south or the seashore, and so he would use terms that were, say, the common terms in the different locations, different localities, and so that people would be able to sort of pick a term that they could, and amongst the whole cluster of words that they could relate to. And Shakespeare does the same kind of thing. In many of Shakespeare's plays, you get these same strings of words that he uses, 3 or 4, maybe half a dozen words that all point to a particular quality. And again, because you had the illiterate people that were there who were, pub owners or farmers, and you had lords and ladies and the royals all gathered together, and different people would have different backgrounds, also from different parts of the country. To continue then. Truth, however, requires expression in ways that are not ultimate, because language is not an ultimate reality. Language deals with appearances. Even the language of our own thoughts is based upon perceptions which we have seen are not ultimate truths. They mirror conventional reality. So when it comes down to the teaching and encapsulation of the Dhamma, conventional expressions are necessary because the Dhamma has to be realized by people living in the conventional world. There are many different means of describing the path and the goal, and encouraging the interest and right attitudes that will be conducive to practice. These paintings are one of those means. I use the elaborate arch that frames the sky to depict the conventions of the world. Conventional teachings can be elaborate or simple, beautiful or functional, It's a matter of taste. But there are plenty of them. Each teacher may add one or two more to the general stockpile. Some conventions get outdated or lose their appeal, but for the most part they all have a beauty and a value, and when used skillfully they encourage the realization of ultimate truth. In fact, most people would never realize ultimate truth without them. The Buddha left the teachings of Dhamma, which include the Four Noble Truths, and the Vinaya. These form the arch that improves our view of the unconditioned sky and helps us to see it clearly. But if we get fascinated by the conventions, we miss the point too. So and he's talking about the sort of beautiful decorations, the interwoven vines sort of climbing up either side that form the archway, and then move into these intricate sort of lotus-like patterns around the edge, and that you can get fascinated by the frame of the picture and miss the great open space that's being depicted inside. And an image that the Buddha used is a teaching called the drum of the Dasarahas, and he talks about this great war drum that this particular community had, the Dasarahas, and that the drum had been repaired and decorated and fixed up so many times that the original drum was buried and kind of became completely non-functional under the weight of all the repairs and the extra pegs and bits of this and that were tagged onto it. And so that he said this is like the teaching, if it's over embellished and over decorated and say dressed up in so many layers of elaboration or commentary or kind of fancy language, then the teaching itself is lost amongst all of the additions and decorations. And, you can often see an example of this in some of the styles of chanting, where in a way it's like the more important the ceremony, or the more sort of special the occasion, or something like a royal funeral or a big sort of super duper fancy puja, the chanting gets so elaborate and so decorated and so intricate you can't actually hear what the Pali is. It's like the words are so sort of drawn out, or that there's so many tones in there. It's so embellished that it's impossible to hear that the people are actually chanting Ewang Me Sutang, because it's sort of so kind of hyper elaborate. So it's one of those examples of the teaching has got totally lost in all of the decorations. Another feature of the painting, another feature at the bottom of the painting, is the Bhikkhu giving a Dhamma talk. This could be Kandanya, or some other monk giving a sermon to a few fellow monks and some lay people. It's true, Kandanya had insight, but he was not mentioned as a great teacher. It's said that he spent most of his time practicing on his own, returning after 12 years to pay his respects to the Buddha. He did not become a chief disciple like Sariputra Moggallana, nor a great teacher like Kaccayana, nor a bastion of the Sangha like Mahakassapa, Upali and Ananda. Yet he did realize the deathless. There's also, interestingly enough, a story about Venerable Kandanya, why he lived away from the Buddha. As I said, he went away for 12 years and then came back and paid his respects to the Buddha. And then it said that after that, then he went off and again lived on his own. And it said that because he didn't want to claim any kind of special status because of being the Buddha's first disciple, and that he out of humility didn't want that to be made into something special, or for him to be seen as anybody particularly significant. So he particularly chose to take off and live by himself. And the story also goes that the Buddha's son Rahula did the same thing. That there's a couple of suttas that describe the Buddha teaching him when he was a novice and then as a young monk, and then Rahula reaching arahantship. But then the stories just stop, and the commentarial tales, as I understand them, say that exactly the same way Rahula didn't want to be seen as anybody special or having any kind of particular rank or particular role in the Sangha. So he sort of took himself off and lived quietly off in the remote foreign regions, so that he wouldn't be like, he's the Buddha's son, or made into a Dhamma heir or something of that nature, but rather just chose not to introduce that kind of dimension into the Buddhasasana, which is shows great skill and foresight both for Kandanya and Rahula. Teaching Dhamma is not easy for everyone. Some enlightened beings have no gift for words, while some great speakers are far from enlightenment. Very true. Here the speaker is meeting a rather unreceptive audience. One of the monks seems to be following what is being said, the others appear bored or even displeased. Similarly, with the families below, only one couple seem to be interested. As for the rest of them, they're thinking, everything that arises passes away, so what? The floor tells us why this message isn't well received. The place where we are, where we walk, sit, live and die, is a place of strong movement this way and that. It's impermanent, true, but the movement whirls us away from the quiet reflection of wisdom. How many of the people in the painting are really listening? Does anyone notice the sky that looms behind? And so that you have a couple of people down here that are sort of sitting, chatting, and then the monks are off in the edges here, and then the various lay people sitting around, probably checking the messages on their cell phones, and such like, as does happen. But the great open space is something that doesn't grab the attention. And again, that's a very common theme of Lumpur Sumedho's teachings. And there's one classic talk of his that's called Noticing Space, that it's both in his collected teachings and also is printed up as a little separate booklet about how space is not interesting, peace is boring, silence, spaciousness, peace is not attention-grabbing. Our senses are geared to notice threat, to notice things that are attractive, things that are annoying, food sources, to invasion of our personal space, our territory, sexual desire objects. That's what our senses are geared for. You scratch the surface, and we're hunter-gatherers way back to our animal ancestry. So our senses don't notice the space between people. They don't say, "Oh, look, there's empty space between me and Rookie." No, the eye goes to the person. There's Rookie sitting there. That's what the senses do, because the object, it could be a saber-toothed tiger that's going to turn you into lunch, or it could be an interesting berry on the bush. That's where the eye goes to. The space beside the bush is not interesting. It's not threatening. It's not ownable. So the attention goes to what's on the bush, or what's making that noise. Silence only gets interesting when it's one of those, it's too quiet. Why have the birds stopped singing? It means there's a predator around. But space is not interesting, and as Lumpur Sumedho would often say, that you never see a newspaper headline saying Ajahn Sumedho had a mindful inhalation. But that doesn't happen. But Ajahn Sumedho's run off with a 16-year-old girl comes to the monastery, then that would definitely make the Hemel Gazette, and probably the Daily Mirror and even the Guardian. So space doesn't grab our attention, but it's in a way it's the best example for the realization of Dhamma. In a way, it's the best example because it's spacious, and yet it's also the worst example because space is not aware or awake, and so it's both the best example and the worst example, you can say. Other teachers fare better. Some have a toolkit filled with skillful means, such as clever arguments, meditation techniques, or personal charisma which capture people's attention. Some great teachers have everything going for them. So do some great frauds. When one uses skillful means and they are successful, it doesn't really matter who the teacher is. For this reason, much of Buddhist practice is described and conveyed in terms of skillful means. Techniques, practices or conventions are used as access points to the Dhamma. Skillful means are established, but not each one is suitable for every personal taste. In order to survive through time, abstract concepts are needed. Myth, symbols, archetypes, and even temples and shrines or living beings are commonly used vehicles by which conceptual or abstract terms can be conveyed. Within Buddhism, there is a rich storehouse of skillful means as well as abstract concepts. It's so rich and varied, people actually quarrel over which is the right one. This is why the presence of a living teacher is invaluable to help us assess the suitability of skillful means or to properly interpret the language of the teaching. Such a person should be one who is well trusted and who has contemplated the teachings in the light of his or her own experience. If this teaching can be communicated so that it is understood by just one person, then it can survive. The living, breathing individual experience of the Dhamma is an indispensable aspect of the teaching. It brings the teaching to a life that goes beyond the end of the discourse. Hence, the Buddha rejoices. And then we have a second little line drawing that Ajahn Sucitto has done with a monk sitting at the foot of a tree with an attendant fanning him to keep him cool, and then an attentive couple of lay people, looks like a mother and child, listening and heeding what is being said. So, and I've mentioned a few times before, but I think it's worth saying again that we talk a lot about Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Sumedho, and they are great teachers and the sort of founders of this community. But one of the things that is really striking about, in a way, what makes them great teachers, and was particularly striking to me when I was a novice and a young monk in Thailand, was how even though Ajahn Chah had an extraordinarily magnetic personality, he could be very compelling and very charming and was very attractive as a person, but he never wanted your attention. He was never saying, "Look at me," or like I was saying about Ajahn Viradhammo when he was chanting the Patimokkha, that Ajahn Chah gave him a really bad time, was kind of insulting him, making him feel uncomfortable, and so telling him that Western monks stink, and that they don't wash their robes, and they basically smell horrible. And so that he wasn't trying to be pleasing, or he wasn't afraid to be disliked. And that was really striking, was that even though he could be the absolute center of attention, he had no interest in that as an end in itself. And that was really striking to me, because the models that you have is that someone who's at the center, who's the powerful figure, is the head of the department, or the headmaster, or who's a famous actor or film star, or pop singer or something, and they want to be famous, they want to be loved, they want to be appreciated, and that they, in a sense, they feed on that admiration or that attention. And this was a whole different model. I couldn't really say exactly why it was apparent that it was so different, but there was this different dynamic there, that as long as paying attention to him was useful to you, then he was very happy to draw your attention and to teach and to be interesting and say compelling as a teacher. But he didn't need anybody's attention in order to feel good, or to feel complete, or to have his worth being affirmed. He wasn't looking for anyone to adore him. In fact, as anyone who tried getting a bit sort of gushy or over-attached, you'd be immediately sent off to Chiang Rai or down to Suan Gloy. That if you started to get sort of too attached or fixated on him as a person, then you'd immediately be sent away, or he'd really give you a very bad time. He'd just insult you and make you feel dreadful and make you hate him. Not because he was just malicious, but just so that you would get to, okay, now you know what love is. Okay, now let's give you an opportunity to explore hate. and would really, and he didn't care. It was the same to him whether you hated him or you loved him. It was completely equal. That like and dislike really were of equal value to him, and it's quite marvelous. And it wasn't that he was sort of protecting anything or trying to sort of nurture a particular kind of self-image. It was just this the natural artifact of a tremendous emptiness, a spaciousness within him, and a capacity to respond to situations. So it was that at the time I couldn't really understand exactly what was going on, but I got as far as, this is really different. This is not someone who is famous or who is loved, who wants to be famous or loved. He has no interest in being powerful or liked as an end in itself. Wow. But also seeing but being liked or being listened to is a useful thing, insofar as people will pay attention to the words that he says, and those words can have a beneficial effect on their lives. So therefore, act in ways that can sustain or encourage sustaining that attention. So I will leave it there for today and can open things up for any comments or questions, reflections. Lawrence.
Have you any recommendations for contemplating space? Something I looked at some of the elements of things, but I just don't know where to start with space.
Well, there's all kinds of things. Interestingly enough, in the Visuddhimagga, the object that they suggest using to develop the akasa dhatu, the element of space, empty space, is an open window. Just very, very down to earth. Just putting your attention on the window and think, oh, that's space there. Just to set an intention at the beginning of the day, and to both with physical space. So that, say, okay, when I'm in the temple or when I'm in the sala, let's make a point of noticing the spaces between people rather than the people. Let's see if I can remember to do that. So that in the beginning of the day, just setting that as a clear, conscious intention. Similarly with sound. Okay, if I'm hearing somebody speak, can I put my attention on the silences between the words rather than just on the words? And or if you're in the temple, just to see, can I just look at the space in the temple rather than seeing the eye going towards the shrine or towards the beams and such? Can I bring my attention to rest on the space between the Buddha Rupa and the wooden beams? Or can I bring attention to that? So I've done a lot of that over the years. So making a very clear and definite resolution, I'd say during the morning sitting, say, okay, for today, I'm going to make a point of using sound and visible form in this way, and I'll try to remember to do that. And so it takes a bit of getting going, because you keep forgetting and getting distracted. But if you set a clear conscious intention at the beginning of the day, and then to sustain that slowly over a week or two, it becomes more and more of something that you remember. And then when you do that, just see, okay, how does the perspective change when then you are able to say, oh, well, when I look at the people, then I think of their name. Well, that's Andre, and that's Amita, and so then your mind, you give a name, and then the mind comes up with a story. Oh, she's like this, and he's like that, and she's from this country, he's from that country. And then if you say, okay, that's the space between Amita and Andre, and the space doesn't have a name, it doesn't have a nationality. Oh, look at that! There isn't a story that goes with it. Aha! And so when you look at the consequences of noticing the space, and then also another way of developing it is just looking at the ending of things. So not just the spaces between words, but just notice, say, when this reading and this sort of Dhamma session finishes, then as we all get up to go, just to notice, oh, that ended. That was the thing that had begun, and now this is the after the reading experience, or that going through a door. Okay, I was expecting to go through the door. Now this is the experience of having gone through the door. I was on my way to the temple, and now that journey has finished. Now I'm in the temple. That was the thing that happened, and this is the ending of it. So that you're noticing endings. So, and again, just setting and this is a kind of practice that Luang Por Sumedho would often encourage. Just spend your day noticing endings of sound, feeling, visual things, and it just puts a whole different perspective on your day. You're seeing it in a different manner, and then okay, when something ends, what's the natural result of that ending? And in a sense, it's that if you develop that, that's this whole area. It's really that, in a sense, the bringing to life of the third noble truth, the Satchikata Bhanti, that dukkha nirodha is to be realized, so that when something ends, the attention goes on to the next interesting thing. It doesn't look at the experience of something having just stopped or finished or resolved. It's okay. I've come into the temple and now the chanting is going to begin. Or I've this meeting's finished. Now what have I got to do before the chanting starts? Or it's that again. That's our animal instinct. Is that the attention goes to the next interesting thing, my next duty, or my next excitement, or the next whatever, and so the cessation of things is not noticed, because again, peace is not interesting. It doesn't grab our attention, but that development of the third noble truth is so much about realizing space, noticing space, and noticing the ending of things. That this is the dukkha of that sound, or the dukkha of being that person, or the dukkha of making that journey, that has ended. And then, over and over again, there's that recognition, te sangbu pasumo sukho, that when something finishes, there is what remains is peace. But we don't notice that peace because we're so busy getting on to the next thing. And so, keeping it very simple and very practical like that, just to notice, just to set a resolution, and then focus on it in that way. I can't remember the details of what's in Luang Por's Noticing Space talk, but I think if I remember correctly, there's a few things along those lines. You can search it out, and it's definitely there in the collected teachings, because we were putting it all together last year. So.